Hello and welcome everyone to the Amateur Commentator. Today we are here to discuss about the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. This is our Formula One section. I have with me Anshul. Hi Anshul.
So,
So we had a great race in Jeddah. There were some issues. We'll be discussing about it. Before that, I would request everyone to kindly like, share, subscribe our content, and write back to us on how we can improve uh, on whatever we are delivering. And please feel free to give your honest opinions. Thank you. So let's start. So Anshul, give us a brief overview about the race and what your opinion were about how the race finished.
I think it was a fascinating race, and all the changes, regulations in terms of what F1 was trying to achieve. In terms of enabling more combat in terms of racing, that was something which was easily visible, right from between the Alpine races to what we saw at the end between Leclerc and Verstappen. Saying that, it was a positive start for all the starting two rows of the grid after Checo Perez was able to take his first pole position. But luck did not turn out well for him. He stopped just a lap before Latifi crashed, and all the other drivers were able to, take out the time and had a pretty cheap pit stop because of the yellow flags. And then he was down to fourth position directly from the, leading the race. That was something which I felt where he was unlucky. But over and all, it was quite a fascinating race in terms of close racings which we were able to see. The gap at the end, it was only 4.5 seconds, but there were quite a few number of drivers who were not able to finish the race.
So yeah, you ended with how a lot of drivers were not able to finish, and we did see our fair share of retirement in this race. So let's start with even before before the first lap itself. Let's start with Yuki Tsunoda and his Honda engine just not being able to take him to even the first lap to even allow him to start the race. And we have to remember this comes in the background of the Bahrain Grand Prix, where the other three cars having a Honda engine were not able to finish the race. So Max, Checo, and Pierre Gasly were not able to finish it in Bahrain, and this time around, their lone point man in the last race couldn't even start the race. Do you think there is something long term, there's a bigger issue with the Honda engine, or do you just think that these are discrete issues which both the teams would be able to handle?
See, I don't think so. It is a long-term issue. It says that there are a lot of changes which all the teams, they have had to incorporate because of the change in regulations. And one thing we also need to understand from Red Bull and AlphaTauri point of view is uh, Red Bull are developing their own power terrain from this years. Honda, they only have provided a team where they can assist them, but essentially Red Bull are developing their own power terrain. So yes, there will be some challenges initially, but I think by the time summer break is here, I think they should be able to resolve most of their issues, which are uh, at least we should allow them to finish the races. But I don't think so. There will be a lot of challenges for Honda engine that will hamper them finishing the races going forward, at least after a few initial races. But saying that, it's not just the Honda engines. We saw 6 races again. That also included Mick Schumacher, who was not able to start the race because of his crash on Saturday. But 5 other races were not able to finish the race. It included Bottas as well, who was running on Ferrari engine. Apparently, his car was too hot to handle, and he was already running on second, a spare part for which is the overall allocated for the season. So that's why AlphaTauri felt to stop him there. McLaren, Alpine for that matter. So yeah, we saw all the engines which are there on the grid had some issues or the other. We're not still sure whether it's entirely because of the engine issues, or it's because of the heating issues, or it's just because of the track nature of the track. So in a nutshell, yes, it's only the second race of the season, and we are coming to the season after a very big change in terms of the regulations. So it will still take some time for all the teams to get used to that.
Yeah, I think Australia would be a good test. We are away. It's a racetrack which had been in Formula One for a long time. Now it's coming back after a couple of years. Uh, we will be away from the heat of Middle East. So let's see how the engines and the cars perform there. I think both Red Bull and AlphaTauri would be looking closely into how it performs in Australia, considering the fact that if this reliability issues keep coming up with Honda, it could dent Max Verstappen's chances of defending the race, because we have defending the championship, in fact, because we have seen that Ferrari does seem to have a better car at this point of time. And even when we saw Carlos Sainz in both the races actually complaining about handling the car in a couple of situations, and yet he has finished well, he has done well in both the races. So yeah, I think let's see what happens. Maybe it's the heat in Middle East, maybe it's the temperatures, and that could be one of the reasons. So sorry. Let's move on to the other part. Let's move on to competition on the racetrack a bit and talk about Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso, because those few laps between lap 4
Yeah.
and 7th and 8th, those 3-4 laps, those were great racing between two teammates, one an older warhorse, a multiple time world champion. Esteban Ocon is a very good driver. He is a young driver. He's a very reliable driver of what he has shown till now. What do you think about that fight between them, and how do you see that fight actually going throughout the season? How do you see the narrative building throughout the season?
See, it was a very good race for both of them until Alonso had to stop. Um, the thing we need to understand here is they are, competing in a very similar car, although they had the same car last year as well. But this year, since the car has been optimized to, follow better, at least the car which is in front of you. And answering to your second question, going ahead, I think Jeddah is a unique circuit where, most of the times when drivers were overtaking the car in front of them, either they were doing towards the end of the lap or towards the first corner. Now, if drivers are overtaking, the front car towards the end of the lap, there is a DRS zone which comes immediately after that. So it was also giving an opportunity to the car which has been, lapped behind to come back and fight again that thing. I'm not sure whether that would be the nature of all the circuit throughout the season. But yes, the most impressive part was when the team principal of Alpine was asked. He just said that let them race, and we will not give them any directive. But yes, the directive came after some time, where Ocon was asked to hold the position, because at that time it was creating issues in terms of overheating for both the cars. We are still not sure whether that is something which contributed towards Alonso retiring at the end. But yeah, we saw great racing and great communication from the team itself.
Yeah, I think with someone like Oscar Piastri waiting in the wings for Alpine, if it looks like they are favoring one driver over the other, I don't know how that dynamics is going to work for the next season, and how the drivers are going to respond. So I think it was a good race. Yeah, would you like to?
And more importantly, Alonso is at that stage of his career where it's not that he is driving slow. Yes, first race was not at Bahrain was not something which he would have expected, but he is not slow by any means. And the car, we all saw it during the end of last season as well. Alpine is a very quick car, and this year after the regulations, they are able to fight with not just other teams, but also challenging Mercedes at some point of level. So yes, Alonso and Ocon are at the top of their game as of now. It's just that it will be very thrilling to see them not just competing with each other, but also other players in the middle table.
Yeah, Ocon, by the way, finished sixth, and it was a lucky sixth, because Lando Norris would have almost caught him if there would have been another lap. I don't think he would have survived. Ocon would have survived. In fact, if that lap, there was one more lap, Norris would have overtaken him, because that was the DRS zone at that point of time. Anyways, let's move to something very interesting. Do you actually think that Ferrari and Charles Leclerc faked that pit stop, or do you think they were incredibly lucky with the Latifi crash? or was it a both the things combined that led Perez to like come in fourth? Because otherwise he would have possibly won the race if not for that one move.
Yeah, so I don't think so. They faked or bluffed. It's just that if Perez would not have stopped, Ferrari would have stopped that at that lap. It's just that they got lucky, I would say, because of Latifi's crash. And yes, definitely, unless there would have been any other mistakes, or we don't know that what would have happened in the hindsight. But going forward, if that is something which Ferrari is doing, I'm sure Red Bull would be wary of that, and they would not react immediately. I would still say that Perez is someone who is able to manage his tires much better. So even if someone like Perez is leading and he has Leclerc following him, he could actually go for one or two flying lap at tracks like Jeddah or say like Silverstone, where the degrading is relatively higher as comparison to other circuits, because at that point we know that Perez has much better tires as comparison to Ferrari, which according to Leclerc was not the case. But we all know that Perez is someone who manages his tire better. But no, they were not faking it. It's just that they got lucky, I would say, at that moment of time.
Okay, yeah. I think it was both a bit lucky, and I think there was a tactical element to it. But I guess I would have to agree with you. If Perez would not have stopped at that lap, Ferrari probably would have, and that would have been interesting, like to see how Leclerc could have responded to that after the Latifi crash.
Because another thing there is because Leclerc was not able to challenge Perez, or he was not even able to come close to him. That's why probably if he would not have pitted, either coming in the softer tires or maybe even the medium tires, would have given him the fresher tires to challenge Perez. And by the time I say after one lap or two lap, Perez would have come to pit stop. He would have tried to undercut that. So that was the strategy, I think, at the overall level from Ferrari side. But it says that Red Bull fell into the trap.
So talking about pit stop strategy, let's talk about the second pit stop, which the second. Let's talk about the pit stop that happened during Alonso and after Alonso and Ricciardo's crash. We saw a couple of cars getting in and getting out, and Lewis Hamilton being incredibly unlucky. I would say at that point of time he had not stopped till then. I think he till that point in the race he had not stopped, and I think that may have cost him a place or two. In fact, when he finished 10th, I think the question he asked was, does anyone who finished 10th gets any point or not? So I think that's where Hamilton is. He has no idea how to be out of top three, and this would be hurting him. So yeah, let's take us through what happened during that period when we saw Alonso's car, we saw Ricciardo, we saw Valtteri Bottas also stopping because of that his engine overheating. So yeah, talk us through that phase of the race.
See, one thing, let's start with Hamilton's part. Both of the cars which stopped, Ricciardo and Alonso both, they were able to reach to the pit lane, and essentially they closed the pit lane. But by the time, the director actually closed the pit lane, few of the cars actually pitted and they changed the tires and went ahead. Now, Hamilton had the time to do that. It's just that the Mercedes team was not very up to the mark. And by the time he crossed the pit lane, then only he got the information. So in a way, he was unlucky there, yes, but he had two chances, not just one, not just the second yellow flag, but even the first yellow flag when Latifi crashed. He could have changed the tires there as well, because he went on a strategy, in a harder tires. Yes, the first crash was somewhere around 15 to 16 lap, and he was still on the harder tires. He could have still gotten out in a much harder tires again. So that would have given him the opportunity. It's just that he was a bit unlucky, and I will drive more towards what the team from the communication pit and the pit lane was not able to provide the information to Hamilton on the timely basis. But coming to the last point where you said whether the number 10 position will receive any points or not, I think it was being a bit cheeky. I'm sure he knows how much points the number 10 driver receives.
Do you really think that? Do you think that what has happened in the past couple of races and how the cars are shaping up and how how well Red Bull and Ferrari are doing, despite the fact that both of the Red Bull cars were not able to complete the races in Bahrain. Yet it does look like Red Bull and Ferrari are a bit better, way ahead of Mercedes, and there is a lot of catching up for Mercedes to do. So, do you think that that is also showing in that communication channel between the drivers, the race engineers? They do seem. I'm not sure. I'm not a great psychologist. I've not read. I mean, I'm not that knowledgeable about psychology or other things, but I think somewhere the pressure is getting into the pit lanes as well of Mercedes.
I don't think so. There is pressure, but I'll bring in few different angles and few different topics here. See, when we talk about Red Bull and Ferrari being ahead of Mercedes, that is not reflected on the time points table as of now. Mercedes and Red Bull are very close to each other in terms of the points from the constructor point of view. Now, coming back to the car, we are expecting upgrades to Mercedes car come the Australian Grand Prix. Now, when we talk about Russell and Hamilton both, right? Russell has been doing fairly well as comparison to Hamilton on the tracks. That is something which is easily visible. Yes, Hamilton, was on the podium in the first race, but at least the consistency part is something which is visible from the Russell's end. That is something which I can maybe pinpoint to because pre-season we were not sure whether Hamilton will come back or not, and whether that actually delayed him coming into the environment where he started the testing earlier. Because although he's driving the Formula One car for quite some time, this is an entirely new setup. So whether he did not have that much opportunity to gel with the car with the new setup, so if that is another reason, I'm not sure. So I don't think so that they are way behind in terms of the what they can achieve, because what we have seen in the two races is Honda engine is also vulnerable. So we are not sure how many races both Verstappen or Perez will be able to finish. Saying that, Mercedes do not have that strong pace which they had the last season relative to Red Bull or Ferrari. So that is something, if they are able to upgrade going ahead or improve their performance, then they will be in the mix. But right now, they are not way behind in terms of points. It's just that the performance is lacking from the car and the straight line speed.
Yeah, I mean, it will also be a cause of concern considering the fact that we'll be getting into the European races where actually Red Bull outperformed them last time around, and this time around they have two teams to compete in that, where they have been relatively less competitive. I would say I wouldn't say they have not been competitive, but Red Bull have had the upper hand over them in the past couple of years. So. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about George Russell. How impressed have you been? Because we have seen that Mercedes is still not at the level at which Ferrari and Red Bull are, and but he has consistently been getting the points. He has done well in during qualifying as well. He has the fact that he outqualified Hamilton by such a margin in Saudi Arabia. That would be something. And we all saw the reaction of Lewis Hamilton actually when he saw the timings and all. So how impressed have you been with Russell? Because even in this race, we didn't see a lot of him. He didn't capture a lot of TV time. He drove well. He finished fifth behind both the Ferraris and the Red Bulls. And the next guy, which was Ocon, was not near him actually. There was a fairly good gap between him and the other team. So if Alpine is actually looking to challenge McLaren this season, I'm not sure whether they would be able to do, because I think Russell has been impressive. What have been your views on his essence from Williams to McLaren?
Yeah, so the performance of Russell till now, I would say it's like a wicket keeper in cricket who is not talked about because he's doing fairly well. If you're talking about him, either he's doing extraordinary well or extraordinary very bad. So I think it has been a pretty decent start for Russell initially. But what we are forgetting to understand here is they are not at a stage where they are competing with Alpine or AlphaTauri still. They are still ahead of them. It's just that if they are able to bring in the improvements, they'll still be competitive for the top three. But I think the first two races has shown that Mercedes is a strong third, if not the second. and it will be very difficult for someone like AlphaTauri or Alpine, or for that matter, Alfa Romeo, and all those teams to compete Mercedes for the third spot. And
Yeah,
to saying that in terms of the performance of Russell, yes, he outperformed Hamilton in the Saudi Arabia qualification, but that is more to do in terms of Hamilton's car and performance, I would say, than how well Russell drove.
yeah. One of the team which you missed when you talked about other teams competing with Mercedes is Haas. I know Haas aren't competing with Mercedes for that number 3 position. They are nowhere near that. But we'll talk about the Mick Schumacher incident a bit later. But how do you feel Kevin Magnussen on his return has delivered for Haas, and are you surprised that Haas have been this good, at least in the first couple of races?
I'll answer to the second question first. I'm not surprised, because if they are also running in the same engine what Ferrari is using, I'm absolutely not surprised. And more importantly, they've also invested entirety of their time last year into towards building the new car. Coming back to Magnussen, I think the time frame which he was allowed and the time frame within which he was able to join Haas and perform, in fact, outperform his teammate, was something which was, I would say, magnificent. Because being out of F1 for so much long time and coming back and slotting directly and scoring points is something quite extraordinary. That too, for a team like Haas who did not perform that well last year, it was quite a challenge for them. And they were also coming from some turmoil in terms of the sponsorship, in terms of dropping their drive for all the political reasons. So also the team under which he was performing, he already knew those teams. And it was quite encouraging, I think, and interesting to see. And I was very happy to see Magnussen performing.
We'll be moving to Australia next. That famous clip from Australia in Drive to Survive actually made Gunther Steiner so famous, and perhaps the most famous guy in Drive to Survive in all the 4 seasons. So, what are your expectations from Haas in Australia? Are they going to be the wankers? Are they going to look like the wankers?
I think Mick Schumacher needs to step up. We heard a lot about him before the last season, which was his debut season at F1. It was understandable that Haas did not have a very good car last year. But seeing how Magnussen is able to perform and extract out of the Haas car, I think it would not be wrong to expect more out of Mick Schumacher. At least if Magnussen is able to compete with someone like Gasly or Tsunoda, same should be expected out of Mick as well. He's not a bad driver. He did fairly well in F2 circuit. So Mick Schumacher will have to step up if Haas has to compete for the mid-table circuit. Now, coming back to your question in terms of being competitive, I'm not sure whether Mick will be completely fit going into Australian Grand Prix if Haas will have another substitute in place of him. So that is something which we'll see as we move closer to Australian Grand Prix. But yeah, I think we can expect a good race out of Magnussen, because he was the same driver to whom it happened the last time around, what we saw in Drive to Survive. So he will have some pleasant and bad memories at the same time, and he would want to definitely rectify the result of the last time.
Okay, so we hadn't actually talked about Drive to Survive till now in our podcast, but yeah, I mean that is something that has made Formula One quite famous in US. I would rather say rather than other markets, because I don't think that it has had that much impact in India. I from what I follow over Twitter and what I've seen, it still seems like the same bunch of people are following Formula One who have been following it since Schumacher. So let's hope that since Schumacher stays, actually, since Michael Schumacher stays and not Mick. So let's hope that maybe it will gain some traction in India as well, and someday the Buddha International Circuit would be again able to host a Formula One race, hopefully sooner rather than later. So let's move on to the main fight, and I think the fight that is going to define this season and perhaps the championship of 2022 as well. Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, we saw what happened in Bahrain. We saw the same thing happening here as well. Yes, Perez was incredibly unlucky with the yellow flag, with the fact that he went on to into the pit stop and into the pit lane, and then it all happened, and he could not regain his position. He had to give his position back to Carlos Sainz as well. All that aside, we are witnessing some brilliant racing from two young drivers who know each other pretty well, who have raced with each other for a pretty long time, from go karts to Formula One. Both are different kind of drivers. They were different philosophy, different style of driving. Uh, Both belong to two very different teams, whose philosophy of races are also quite different. So, how are you enjoying Max Verstappen versus Charles Leclerc's fight? And just tell us what your views were when during the last 5-6 laps they were trying to overtake each other. I think it was in lap 43 when both of them braked to allow the other to go through, because they knew that at the start of the next lap there was another DRS zone, and anyone who overtakes now would be overtaken at that point of time. So just tell us about your views on those two fighting it out.
See, we have already seen in the previous seasons what Verstappen can do. And if he has a right car, he is probably one of the best in the circuit right now. But I'm really impressed in terms of how Leclerc has performed in the first two races, in terms of his consistency, which he can do across 50 laps, 55 laps. That is something which I'm really impressed. It's different thing to have a car which is competitive, but it's entirely different thing to maintain that throughout the race. So that is something which I'm really impressed how Leclerc is performing. In terms of their competition, I think what mistake Verstappen did in Bahrain, he was able to learn from the same mistake here. Even in Bahrain also, after overtaking in the corner, you had a second DRS zone, which was allowing Leclerc to overtake again. And in doing so, Verstappen was hurting his own tires. Now, he rectified that. He only did it once, and he figured out that that is something which is going to happen again. So that's why the braking part for the team, for both the drivers happened. And see, I would still say that Verstappen is someone who will drive to the edge and to the corner and with a relatively higher speed and higher risk. Leclerc is someone who will be consistent. He understands that it's a long season and they are in a stronger position in terms of the performance of the car. So longer game is something which I would feel Leclerc is playing. But one thing interesting, which again hypothetically speaking, if in the first pit stop instead of Perez, if Leclerc would have stopped, Leclerc would have come at 4th, and we would have had Perez, Verstappen, Sainz, and Leclerc. In this sequence, what is something which we have not discussed is, what if Verstappen is faster than Perez? Will Red Bull allow Verstappen to go ahead? Yes, for sure. That is something which we can expect. And Perez will be happy to do that because he already knows he's a second driver. But what about Sainz and Leclerc? If Leclerc is faster than Sainz and he is behind Sainz, what will be the dynamic between both the Ferrari drivers? That is something which will be very interesting going forward. And I'm sure this is something which we'll witness. The most interesting thing is I'm waiting for Italy and Netherlands. Because what happened to to Red Bull last year, Ferrari is at the similar pace. They are much more better in sectors where there are a lot of turns, lot of slow turns. So the downforce for Ferrari is much better than Red Bull. And Red Bull is stronger at sectors where Mercedes was stronger last year. So the dynamics has completely reversed for Red Bull, and it will be very important to see how they perform in the European circuits.
Yeah, I think considering let's hope that Mercedes also resolves some of their issues. Then it would be brilliant to see a three-way fight in there. So just talking about the Sainz and Leclerc fight, we've not seen that till now. It has not happened, possibly because Ferrari were not that competitive in last year. We have not seen them. Even this year, it has looked like Leclerc has got the better car. We have seen a couple of statements from Sainz as well. He's not been that comfortable, yet he has he has driven well. He drove well in both the races, and uh, the fact that he has done it so consistently over such a longer period in both the races, it means that it is not a big issue that he's facing. There are some minor tweaks that may be needed, but if that happens and if he's comfortable with the car and both are comfortable with their cars, yeah, it would be interesting to see whether they would be allowed to race, whether Charles Leclerc would be favored, because Charles has been given a contract which was not even given to Michael Schumacher, that the duration of that contract. And that does mean that he is kind of their number one driver. He's kind of the de facto number one driver. I'm not sure whether any formal talks has gone through about this thing, whether they feel that Charles is better placed to kind of challenge Max, or whether they would look at it race by race and see how things happen. But that's an interesting point to see what happens there. Yeah, I think it for me also it was quite interesting. The fact that both of them braked at that point of time, and Charles was quick enough to realize what Max had done and then go through. It does show that he's probably going to be the driver who is going to challenge Max throughout the season, rather than anyone else, even if Mercedes come up with the solution to whatever the problem is. So yeah, interesting to see how the European races goes about. Now let's move on and talk about the track a bit. So we'll end this with talking about a couple of tracks, but let's first focus on Jeddah. We have seen that this track looks like one where it is poised to have a lot of accidents. We saw what happened during the qualifying, and well, it looked worse than it was. It kind of looked worse than it was. But again in qualifying, Latifi also crashed. It was Latifi's crash actually which changed the narrative of this entire race as well, with Perez kind of getting to fourth. So yeah, how do you rate the Jeddah track, and do you see they have made some changes at the point where Verstappen had that crash last season? So what do you make of the Jeddah track? The only thing I would say is that the track looks great with that cruise in the Red Sea, and it looked royal, it looked regal. The lagoon, I mean, I love the track in terms of pure aesthetics, but technically, what do you think about the track?
See, I'll delve into two different aspects here. One is safety for sure. Second is the commercial part. Yes, we have a title sponsor who is from Saudi Arabia, but the problem here is safety. Jeddah track is the fastest track at the circuit. The fastest track is a street track. The margin on both sides of the road is zero. Both the sides of the roads, one side is ocean, one side is lagoon. It's barricaded by concrete walls. Now, the problem is not just that. The problem here is there are a lot of turns which are blind. So let's forget about race for a second. Let's talk about qualifying only. Now, in qualifying, a lot of drivers are going on fast lap. A lot of drivers are on their outer lap. There are a lot of blind corners, and if some of the drivers who are in their faster lap, they are not able to visualize, or the vision is not clear in terms of which are the slower drivers ahead of them, that could be very much harmful or destructive for the drivers. We saw what happened to the car of Mick Schumacher. It essentially was broken into two halves. Now, the car was able to take the entire impact. Still, Schumacher was not able to get out of the car himself and was essentially required to be lifted through a chopper. Now, I'm not sure whether that risk is worth enough taking if you just have the title sponsor from Abu Dhabi. If it is essential to have a race in Abu Dhabi because of the title sponsorship, it would be much more imperative to build a new track, which is not a street circuit, or make some modifications so that the blind corners can be negated, or introduce some more corners so that the fast corners can be reduced to a safer speed. Because last year also during the qualification, although Verstappen was in a fast lap before in the qualification scenario, That particular crash could have been fatal as well. Yes, no doubt he was going for a faster lap, but you see the margin of error is very less. The Latifi crashed also during the race. Yes, it's a driver error, but you are driving the car at 300 kilometers per hour for 50 laps. You're bound to make mistakes, and the Jeddah track is not forgiving. It's not something like a Monza or say for that matter Azerbaijan, where we also saw huge crashes, but they were not fatal. So there is something which I'm not sure whether the safety versus the commercial part can be brought together.
Well, there were a couple of other issues with that as well. We actually witnessed the bombing of Aramco facility in Jeddah just a day before the race. There are talks about cancelling the race. It obviously didn't happen.
Yeah.
And when you talked about some drivers on their out laps, some drivers on the main laps, we actually saw an accident which was avoided between Ocon and Ricciardo. That could have been pretty bad if Ocon would have crashed into Ricciardo. That could have been pretty fatal as well. So yeah, I think I don't know. It's a fast track. It's an exciting race. It's a challenging track for drivers as well. But as you said, when you are driving those cars at 300 kilometers per hour, drivers will make error. It will happen. Even the best of drivers make error, and the track should protect them from those kind of errors. Those minor errors should not be fatal. Yes, even in case of Mick Schumacher's accident, it was a driver error, but the price that he paid was too much for that small error. And this is going to happen. Most of the cars are at 300 kilometers per hour, and they are bound to lock up sometimes, maybe move the steering wheel a bit more than it is required, and they would go and crash into the walls. But yeah, I think some. Yeah.
And another thing is, like, see, here we are in the beginning of the season. Last year, Jeddah was the second or third last race of the season.
Yeah,
when you have the driver championship, when you have the constructor championship on the line, and assume that we were racing with these set of cars, the stake would have been much more higher, and drivers would have been, incentivized there to go full out. So that could create another issues. So for me, the safety is for the paramount. Mick Schumacher car is completely ruined. They will have to spend another $1 million, which I'm not sure they have after the cancelling of the sponsorship. But that is a secondary thing. The life of the driver is an important thing, which I think is a challenge, at least in the Jeddah circuit.
Yeah, and I dread of the day when for some reason it rains in Jeddah and the race is on a rainy day. I am not sure what is going to happen. I don't want to even think about that. Let's talk about a new track that was unveiled where we'll have a race in 2023. That's the third American track we'll be having a race. It's the Las Vegas circuit, the entertainment capital of the world. As we spoke about earlier, that DTS seems to have captured the American market. Now, we used to have the Indianapolis Grand Prix. Now we have one in Texas. We'll be having one in Miami, and then Las Vegas from next year onwards. Did you get to see the track? What are your initial feelings about the race? It is going to be a night straight race, I believe.
Yeah. So I have not seen the track. I have just seen the layout, but from the first impression, it just seems to be a fast street circuit again. We'll have to go into detail in terms of, again, it should not turn out a second Jeddah where instead of speed, the safety should be compromised. But as we spoke about, Drive to Survive is something which they are trying to capture the US market. So I'm sure the commercial aspect is involved in the Las Vegas race circuit as well. But again, my concern here is I come back to Jeddah again. If it's a street circuit and it's a fast street circuit, from the first impression, what I'm able to see in the circuit, the safety should be the concern for the drivers.
I don't think this one has as many corners as Jeddah has, and there are a couple of pretty long stretch of straights. So yeah, I don't know whom is it going to help in the next season, because if the race was this season, I would say that Red Bull would have been favorites, considering the kind of straight speeds that they have. Even in Jeddah, we saw that there were times when Max was driving almost 20 kilometers faster than 20 kilometers per hour faster than Charles on the same stretch. So yeah, I think if it would have been this year, it would have been a race for Red Bull to lose. Yeah, so that's it for this week. I think let's see what happens in Australia. Daniel Ricciardo would be wanting to set things straight. He has not had a couple of not had a good year with McLaren, and not had a couple of good races also right now. So going to his home track a couple of years later, I think he would be wanting to set the record straight. Let's see what the Charles Leclerc Max Verstappen fight takes us. So yeah, thank you, Ansul. Thank you for this episode. Thank you, everyone. Just request everyone again to kindly like, share, and subscribe our content, and write back to us on what you would see that needs to be included in our episodes. And yeah, thank you again.